The Adventures of Pinocchio.
Geppetto was a carpenter. He could make anything out of wood. One day he made a wooden puppet and called him Pinocchio.
I wish you could be my son,
said Geppetto. That night, Geppetto's dream came true. His wooden puppet was brought to life by a fairy. When Geppetto woke up in the morning, he heard a voice. It was his wooden puppet. Now Pinocchio could talk and walk.
Here are your books. Go to school and promise me you'll be a good boy,
said Geppetto.
I promise you, Papa,
said Pinocchio. On his way to school, Pinocchio encountered a circus.
Wow, how exciting!
Shouted Pinocchio. Pinocchio forgot his promise to his papa. As he was watching the circus performance, his nose grew longer. Pinocchio continued on his way to school. He met a boy, and the boy invited Pinocchio to Toyland. It's a place full of toys and sweets.
Sure, I will go with you,
said Pinocchio. Pinocchio had fun with the boy day after day, and his nose grew longer and longer. One day, Pinocchio heard people talking about his papa. His papa drowned in the sea while looking for Pinocchio. Pinocchio was sad. He went to look for his papa and was swallowed by a whale. Pinocchio found himself inside the whale. His papa was lying there too.
Papa, wake up! It's me, Pinocchio. Please forgive me. I will be a good boy,
cried Pinocchio. Geppetto opened his eyes and was happy to see his son again.
Let's go home now,
said Geppetto. Suddenly, a fairy appeared and miracles happened. Pinocchio was turned into a real boy and his nose became normal. Soon, they were home safe and sound. Pinocchio and his papa lived happily ever after.
The Fairy Flag.
Once upon a time, a Scottish prince fell in love with a fairy princess. But the fairy king didn't approve of their marriage. He said,
"One day the human will die. Fairies live forever. You won't be happy."
The fairy princess burst into tears. The fairy king felt sorry and said,
"All right, but you must come back to the fairy kingdom after 1 year and 1 day."
The couple got married, had a baby boy, and lived happily in Dunvegan Castle. After 1 year and 1 day, the fairy princess said farewell to her husband. The prince was very sad. In order to cheer him up, his servants hosted a party. There were people singing, dancing, and playing the harp at the party. The prince had a great time. The baby was left alone and cried. No one heard him but his mother, the fairy princess. She appeared at his bedside and wrapped him in a golden shawl. She sang a beautiful lullaby, and after he fell asleep, she was gone. Years later, the baby grew into a young man. He told his father about the fairy princess's visit and the magic shawl. If the magic shawl was waved 3 times, it would bring miracles. One day, a terrible plague broke out. Many cattle and sheep were dying. The sun waved the magic shawl 3 times. And a group of fairies appeared. They touched the animals with their swords, and the animals recovered. The Scottish people were saved from starvation. Today, the magic shawl is kept as a fairy flag in Dunvegan Castle.
Orange Girl.
Once upon a time, there was a prince from Mexico. He wished to marry the most beautiful woman in the world, so he began a journey. During his journey, he passed by a tree with beautiful oranges. The prince picked one and cut it in half. To his surprise, a beautiful girl appeared. They fell in love with each other at first sight.
I'm going to find a pretty dress for you before we go back to my castle and get married. Stay here and wait for me,
said the prince. At that time, a gypsy girl passed by. After hearing the orange girl's story, the gypsy said to her, "Let me tie a bow in your hair. You will look more beautiful when the prince returns." As soon as the bow was tied, the orange girl turned into a dove. The gypsy girl changed her clothes and waited for the prince. The prince didn't realize it was a gypsy girl, so they went back to the castle and got married. One day, the dove flew to the prince's garden and found the prince crying. The prince took the dove in his hands. He started stroking its head and untied the bow. Immediately, the dove changed back into the orange girl. The orange girl told the prince what had happened. The prince was angry and ordered the gypsy to leave his castle. Finally, the prince and the orange girl lived happily ever after.
Why do zebras have striped skin? As more and more people found donkeys useful, people started to catch them. They used donkeys to carry heavy loads, but fed them little food. Donkeys were frightened. They tried their best to hide from people, but it was no use. One day, they decided to call a meeting in the woods. One donkey said,
Let's seek help from Hare. He is the smartest one.
The rest of the donkeys all agreed at once. The next morning, the donkeys went to see Hare for help. Hare had an idea. He took a bucket of whitewash.
Once you are painted, you are not donkeys anymore. People will not ask you to work for them,
said Hare. All the donkeys were eager to be painted. They fought and pushed each other to be the next one to be painted. Suddenly, one donkey overturned the bucket. That was the end of everything. From then on, the donkeys with black and white stripes were called zebras. They were the lucky ones. The rest of the donkeys were less lucky. They were taken away and continued to work for people. The Puyuma Legend. Once upon a time, a Puyuma girl lived alone with her mom. They were very poor. The girl loved to watch rosy clouds at sunset every day. One day, one of the rosy clouds turned into a handsome man. He fell in love with the girl, and they got married. However, the girl didn't know her husband was actually a rosy cloud. One day, the young man told his wife and mother-in-law to cook and put the food in the bowls. While they were cooking, the young man was circling a field with a long rope. As the sun began to set, he told them, "Now close your eyes until I tell you to open them." Suddenly, the rosy clouds all turned into men and came down to earth. They plowed and sowed. After that, they ate the food in the bowls and turned back into rosy clouds. After a few days, the land was full of vegetables and fruit. The young man broke open the two biggest melons. There was a pig in the biggest one and glutinous rice in the other one. They happily cooked the pig, made glutinous rice cake, and put the food in the bowls. As the sun began to set, he told them to close their eyes. The men appeared again. They harvested the vegetables and fruit, ate the food in the bowls, and quickly turned back into rosy clouds. From then on, the young man lived happily with his wife and mother-in-law. They were not poor or hungry anymore.